Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. My name is Samantha Setti, and I'm the senior web producer here at Wine Enthusiast. Today, I have the pleasure to speak with Stef Ferrari, author of the recently published book Stuzzichini, The Art of Italian Snacking. Stef's longtime love for Italian food and culture is evident not only through her work as a food and travel writer, filmmaker, certified cicerone, and, get this, reformed ice cream entrepreneur, but also in her ability to tell stories and connect with others. Her new book, Stuzzichini, showcases the art and magic of Italian happy hour through delicious recipes for you to recreate at home. But we can't help but wonder, are food and drink at the heart of Aperitivo? Or is there something more fundamental to Italian culture that is creating what many consider a magical experience? Listen to find out what the U.S. can learn from this ritual and how you can embrace it on your own at home. You're invited to a unique opportunity to travel through Italy without ever leaving New York City. Join us on Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 at City Winery for the premiere of Wine Enthusiast's Sip of Italy, an exclusive wine tasting event with authentic food and live music. You'll have the chance to taste wines from nearly 50 of the best wineries in Italy, all serving Wine Enthusiast's 90-plus point wines. Explore the varying flavors of Italy in one unforgettable evening. Don't miss out on this incredible experience. Book your tickets now and get ready to savor the flavors of Italy. Use promo code WeSip10 to get 10% off at wineenthusiast.com/events/sip. Well, Stef, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am so grateful to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I would love, well, first off, congratulations on the release of your cookbook, Stuzzichini. Can you tell me a little bit more about that for our listeners who aren't so familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. So this past spring, the book is called Stuzzichini, The Art of the Italian Snack. And it is a book that is essentially, I kind of describe it as like a handbook for like drinks and snacks. Of course, there's more to it than that if you want to dig deeper, but it's also, at its very most basic form, instructional guide to, creating snacks and cocktails, both alcoholic and non.
And this is not your first rodeo when it comes to cookbooks, am I correct?
It is not. I have a couple of books that one in particular is all about ice cream. It's called Ice Cream Adventures. It was based on my experience owning an ice cream shop. I've also written a book co-authored with my fellow writer who also did the photography for Stuzzichini, named D.P. Alualia. And that book is kind of an essay collection about women who changed the world through food throughout history. And there are some recipes in there as well.
Very cool. And so Stuzzichini, what is Stuzzichini?
Good question. And you're pronouncing it very well, which is impressive because that is usually the first question I get. How do you say this? And we did go back and forth about whether or not to actually name the book Stuzzichini because of that. But I think it's a fun word, and I think it feels to me like what it is. Like the word stuzzicare in Italian, to tease, and stuzzichidenti, which is a toothpick. So it's sort of a cross between those words. And the word Stuzzichini refers to the spread of snacks that you often get when you order an aperitivo in Italy. So if you go and order a spritz or a Negroni in the before dinner hour, which is, usually around like 7 to 9, something like that, they will often bring you a spread of on the house snacks. And that can be anything from peanuts and popcorn to like really super composed, delicate, beautiful bites that are, something that I think we would easily imagine paying, $20 for here in the States. So it's the food that the snacks that go along with your drinks, basically.
I see. So aperitivo, which is, as you mentioned, this Italian happy hour. Yeah, that the food is the stuzzichini. Those are the snacks, and then the drinks are part of it. And there's a whole culture around aperitivo in Italy.
Yes, exactly. The aperitivo. The word aperitivo has, I think, often been used really to just describe the drinks here in the U.S., but in Italy, it's much more of a ritual and a full custom than just a drink.
Interesting. So I feel like we have this very literal definition, right? The food and drink aspect of what people in Italy and through the culture enjoy before dinner. But then there's this cultural significance. I would love to hear a little bit more about that and how you think aperitivo is part of Italian culture. What does it mean for them?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually interviewed a couple dozen people for the book about exactly that. And it was in the book at one point, it didn't make the cut, as many things tend to end up on the cutting room floor during this process. But I essentially asked everyone, what is aperitivo to you? What does that mean? And the answers were varied. I asked a lot of people, younger people, some older generations, and while the answer was a little bit, there was some nuance to it. Mostly it was about this idea of a transition period between, your workday and your time with your people, your family, your friends, your community, and the in between, your workday and dinner. That has changed a little bit over the years, where a lot of people now are just having an aperitivo for dinner, and that there is also a word for that. It's apericena, which is a conflation of aperitivo and cena. And so, it's very much like that moment of the day when you start to relax, when you can exhale and sit down and order a drink and have a snack, and you're not quite ready to dive into dinner yet. Part of the purpose of aperitivo in general is to elongate that process of your evening. It's not just, oh, I'm done with work, let's have dinner, let's get the day done. It is an extension of that, and sort of a prelude to your meal, if in fact you're going to go forward with that. But it's a moment to connect with the people in your life, and to start to relax and take a breath.
And that last part that you just mentioned, the other people, is what I find so admirable about this practice, if you will. It's that in Italy and through this culture, we value being around other people. I just feel like a little bit more. I've just noticed that there's this individualistic mindset around how we drink in the States and how we gather in the States, and it's almost just reserved for weekends. But this seems like, it's not just for special occasions, right?
Absolutely. It's very much a daily thing for a lot of people, and it is extremely focused on community and connection. And I think you're right. I think that, culturally speaking, the US is tends to be an individualistic kind of society. I think we see that in a lot of ways, but in Italy, the idea of being able to, disconnect and connect with real people and the people in your life is very much a part of the culture. This is really where aperitivo came from, was the need and desire to connect with others. So, one of the things that I thought was fascinating about the research that I did for this book was that I started to speak with, again, sort of a broad range of people from different demographics and age groups, and ask them about aperitivo. Where did it come from? How did it start? And I expected, like most things, that I think there's a perception that when something is Italian, it's been ingrained in the culture for centuries. They've been doing it forever. The hundreds of years, 1,000 years, they've been making the same pasta, the same wine, and there's a lot of pride in that, and that's very real. But when I started talking to people about the custom of aperitivo, what I learned, especially from older generations, was that this is something that is relatively new, and by which I mean, the last 20 years or so, which to me felt very surprising. I spoke with a professor that I had when I studied in Florence for a year while I was there, and she told me that when she was growing up, the idea of aperitivo only really applied to men, and it was men having a glass of vermouth before, the women made dinner, and that was pretty much it, and that was usually at home. What has changed and developed over the last couple of decades, though, is that the economy of Italy has changed dramatically, and many young people are migrating to larger cities in search of work. And in doing so, they're leaving behind their families of origin and the people that they, are closest to in a lot of ways. And so they wind up in a new city that is hours from home, or longer perhaps, and they don't have, they get done with work and they're not going home to their parents who are going to make them dinner. They're in search of community. And so they've started to, they started gathering at these bars where they would go and have aperitivo and connect with other people and start to develop their own sort of community and built family. And in the course of that, the other thing is that Stuzzichini in particular is a linchpin of that concept, because these are complimentary snacks. These are young people who are maybe just starting out in their lives and don't have tons of disposable income for a big, pricey dinner at a more formal restaurant. And so they would go and have these snacks and eventually just sort of string it out, and you're enjoying, some bites and some drinks with other people. And it just has become much more of a ritual. And then I think tourists started to enjoy this and take note of it, and has really become, that's when we really started to see, the Negroni sort of explode and the spritz explode. And of course, internet and social media has been part of that. So I could kind of ramble on about that for a long time, but the confluence of factors that has created an environment and in which this ritual has become popular is really interesting to me.
For good reason. I had no idea that aperitivo is a fairly new concept, which, I mean, this might be a bold statement, but it feels like a solution to, Western values, right? Kind of conflict with what has been historically Italian values and that culture. And this seems like a solution as the generation starts to shift. This practice is kind of keeping the Italian culture grounded in a way, which I find really beautiful. I wish there were more opportunities for that in the States.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point and a great way to look at it. I mean, I think, the idea of family is something that is fluid, especially here in the US. And I think we've started to understand that family can mean a lot of different things. And I think that is, whether you call it family or community or however you describe it, I think that is something that has shifted a little bit because of the dynamics in Italy now. And it's starting to become a little bit more clear that, you can find your people outside of the home, and you kind of have to. If we're social animals, we want to be with people. And that really is like, that was the impetus for making this book. Is I love that. For me, my whole life, my whole career has always been about community and building community. And I think there are a lot of people who want to host or want to gather with friends, and it kind of becomes like one of these things where it's like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. It's hard. It's expensive. It's prohibitive for whatever reason, whether that's time or money or just a fear of, being able to put together enjoyable food. And, Stuzzichini are intended, they're created by these bars and restaurants to be really like budget friendly, both from a financial and time perspective. They are complementary, so they can't really cost or take a ton of time for these restaurants. So the idea of translating that into the home and being like, you can have a gathering and have it be pretty, affordable and simple to put together. And the whole point is to not interrupt the flow of conversation, to not interrupt the hang, and be able to just like make sure that people feel good. Because the other thing is, in Italy, it is very, the word taboo came up a couple of times in my interview process. It is a quote unquote taboo to be, drinking and to be drunk, period. And so you don't really drink without food. You don't want to be drunk, and you also don't feel good. I mean, that's a big part of it. Is if you're hosting someone, you want them to feel good when they're in your care, in your company. And so if you're going to give them alcohol, they should also have food. That's just the belief. You just don't do one without, you don't do the drink without some kind of food to help you process it.
Yeah, and it's healthy too, right? I think there's a lot of talk with that word. It's such a difficult term to throw out. Like, is drinking healthy? How do we drink healthfully? But it's also like, when you put it in the picture, it's not about the alcohol. It's not about the food. It's about the gathering. And when you remove that excess portion away from it, when it is taboo, it's almost like you gain more than people realize. And I think that can have such a profound effect on people's well-being.
Definitely. I mean, I think I've seen this a lot where I will be at someone's home and they're kind of topping up your glass with wine or whatever. And that's a really nice way to express generosity. But I had a conversation with someone in Italy, and he was essentially saying that if you get your guests drunk and they go home, the next day they're going to be like, I don't feel good. I don't want to go back there. And so the idea that you also provide them water, you also provide them food, and the when they look back and reflect on their time with you, it's with a positive association that they feel good, that they felt cared for, that they don't, they didn't leave feeling like they were going to be sick or that they were so hungry. And so I think that it's just a nice part of it. The other thing is I am encouraged that there's more of this culture here now. But when I was living in Italy, I really, because it's a daily thing, sometimes I didn't want the alcohol. And there's always a really nice non-alcoholic option. And no one ever makes you feel like you're ordering something that's less than. I love the little bitter red Italian soda. It's called San Bitter, is one of the brands. And they still bring it to you with an orange peel on the rocks, and they'll still bring you Stuzzichini. It's not as if, oh, you aren't really participating. You can still very much be part of the ritual without actually consuming alcohol.
It's accessible, not just in price. And I love that you made that point too, because we are seeing it become more common that people don't always want to drink, and for good reason. Sometimes we have things the next day, or you don't even need to justify it. But I like how it's so inviting, both, again, budget friendly, and it's a ritual. I like that you use that word as well, because it's repeatable. And there are very few things, I feel like, beyond work and sleep and stuff that are repeatable and actually serve us in a positive way.
Yes, totally. And it's something that I miss here. I think we are definitely adopting it a little bit more. I think you see many more places doing things like this, and there's happy hour, and we have our stuff here, but there's just something really that feels really like luxurious and just comforting about Aperitivo and that magic hour, which is what, I think DP, my photographer on this book, did such a great job of capturing with the photos. It's just that moment of, the lights coming on and the sounds of the piazza and the crowds around you and the clinking glasses. And it's just it is really romantic sort of process that I think it sort of feeds your soul. And if you get to do that a little bit every day, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. What do you think is at the heart of that magic?
Good question. I mean, I think I say I should speak for myself, but I have a hard time relaxing. I have a hard time turning it off. I have a hard time, we're a productivity culture. That's just who we are. And so I think to be at a moment in the day where the only thing that's expected of you is to listen to the people that you're with and to, commune with them and talk with them and take care of yourself with food and drink. And I think that's the magic. It's like the permission to just be and enjoy yourself for a few minutes. Yeah, I mean, we really tried to capture that with the book to the sort of multi-sensory part of Aperitivo, because you have your food and drinks, you have the, sights and smells. And I was thinking about it when I was at a bar in Italy, and I was like, what is it about this that makes it so magic, and what can we capture, and how can we translate this in the book? And one of the things that I love is that moment when the lights come on, and especially in the cities in Italy, there are a lot of neon signs, and most of them just say bar or restaurant or gelateria or whatever it is that the place sells and deals in is usually what the sign says. And those are so iconic, and they are such a part of the whole experience. And so I wound up interviewing a neon vendor, a 4th generation neon vendor in Rome, for the book, to kind of understand like how that all ties in. And it turns out there's like this really interesting parallel history of Aperitivo drinks with neon. In fact, one of the first neon signs ever commercially used was for an Italian vermouth. So, there's a lot to it. And can you recreate all of that at home? No, you don't probably have that neon sign, but you can, take cues and just try to create an atmosphere in which people don't feel, rushed or like it's got to end soon.
Yeah. And what you're describing also sounds like presence, because when you start to awaken your senses, right, you have the food, you have the taste, you are tasting things, you hear things, you see things. That awakening of the senses, I feel like brings not only joy, but just so much grounding in the present moment with, you alluded to this too. We have such busy, productive lives that there are so few opportunities for us to kind of like breathe and just be, which is so underrated. I wish more people talked about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the presence thing is so critical when you are building community, to just be able to be with the people that you're with and listen to them and have conversations and not be checking your phone or your watch or wondering where you have to be because this is the hour that every day everyone's going to do this. And that's really freeing. I love what you're saying about awakening the senses because I think we don't always engage fully all around. And when you do, I think that's when you really get a chance to open yourself up to that bit of joy that you get with something like this.
Totally. And the food and the snacks feel like this vehicle, this medium to achieve that state of mind and being.
Definitely. And for me, I think I love junk food. I really do. I'm going on the record. I love gummy bears. So we'll put that out there.
Oh,
But
I'm a sweet treat every day.
good, as you should. But
Exactly.
But the beauty of a lot of this food is it's so simple and there are only a few ingredients often. And so you really do get to marvel at some of this stuff too, where you're just like, I never knew a peach could taste like this, or I never tasted this honey this way before, or I never knew that this spice would be complementary to this fish or something like that. And I think that again, in the busyness culture, where you just like consume and we put things away and we don't even really, think about what they are or how magical that is or how marvelous those things really are. And I love that I can tell you, very frequently during these evenings, everyone at the table stops to sort of like say, wow, this is really incredible, or wow, did you taste this? Or, and I really love that because I think there's so much that goes into the creation of food, the pairing of flavors, the nuance and intuition in Italian food is so remarkable to me. I mean, the amount of times that I've seen something on a menu and go and thought, that's odd, I don't know about that. And then tasted it and been like, oh no, this is amazing. Like, wow, I can't believe no one else is doing this. Like it's just really balanced and intuitive. And I don't think you always pick up those nuances if you're not fully present.
Totally. And I'd love to hear what was one of the most unique aperitivo experiences you had while you were living in Italy.
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind immediately is I was in Sicily at a restaurant and we were doing a little aperitivo prior to, and the drink itself was made with an Amaro from Sicily, a bitter orange Amaro, and they paired it with these little bites they were crackers. They were like a wheat cracker. And on the cracker was a local soft cheese like a ricotta and orange zest, an anchovy fillet, and grated Modica chocolate. And it was one of the best things I've ever tasted. It makes such sense when you actually break it down. It doesn't sound like it, but you have this bitter chocolate and the creamy cheese and the aromatic orange and the briny, salty fish. And then you have this, sort of like neutral grain cracker that has a little bit of sweetness to it. I could not believe it. Like it was just one of those things that I was like, wow, this is incredible. And again, that sort of intuitiveness of using what is local. So that chocolate was made in the area. The anchovies were, everything that was, they always say that what grows together goes together. And because Italians in Italy don't typically look too far beyond for ingredients, they tend to use what's around. And that might mean putting things together that you might not otherwise consider, but when you do it, it does make sense. So that's one of the ones that I love to pull that out and like kind of blow people's minds.
Oh yeah, the way you described it too. At first, I was like, I don't know, I'm thinking about that, but it sounds like it gives you a sense of place, a terroir with food. I always pronounce that word wrong, but
No, you got it.
yeah. as if it were wine, right? It gives you a sense of place, and that could be achieved through food and through Stuzzichini as well.
100%. And I think one of the really cool things about Stuzzichini is exactly that, which is a very low risk way to try new foods. You're not going to buy a huge meal that's, going to cost you a lot of money that you're not totally sure you're sold on. You get to take a little bite, and it's also often made with whatever is local to the place. So, in the north of Italy in the Dolomites, you might find a Stuzzichini with speck or, like a smoked prosciutto-ish meat, or, in Sicily, you might find something that's a little bit more representative of the sort of Mediterranean and North African influence that you find so often in that part of the country. And everything's just really hyper regional, very seasonal. And so you get to taste the place and in that moment, and it's so ephemeral. You may go to the same bar tomorrow and it will be a completely different spread of snacks. It's not on the menu. It's just whatever they have at that moment, whatever they can, kind of put together. So I think that's a really, really fun way to engage with a place.
Yeah, this is honestly inspiring me to think, where am I regionally and how can I recreate this? Because for our listeners, depending on where you are locally, this can be applied to New York, to any wherever you are and what's local there. And so it's interesting and exciting to think that this isn't limited just to Italy, right?
Definitely. And that was something that I really wanted to also drive home with the book, which is that these are like a framework. And if you don't have this particular ingredient, you don't have to import it from Italy. You can use whatever it is that's local to you. And so I did try to include some suggestions. If you are in the South and you don't have hazelnuts, you might have pecans, and they'll work. It is an expression of where you are, but these are just a framework and their starting points and their ideas. And I really do hope people don't just adhere to like the letter of the book, but more the spirit and, putting things together. In fact, I got a couple of notes on certain recipes that were like, is this a recipe? And it's like, nah, not really. I mean, it's just sort of like, it's a guideline. It's ideas. I don't hesitate to even call it a recipe, but there's a dish in here in the book that is seasonal fruit with, it's a crostini basically recipe for a seasonal fruit and prosciutto and honey. And I believe that the book uses crushed hazelnuts. But again, this is like, is it peaches? Is it figs? Are we using plums? Are we using berries? You can do whatever you want. If you want to use a ricotta, you can. If you want to use a goat cheese, you can. It's just use whatever you think highlights what you've got. And if you don't have basil, use mint. And if you don't have, it's meant to be really forgiving that way. You don't have to, sort of bend over backwards and go out with a shopping list and like check the boxes. Just kind of take from the spirit of it.
I love that. There's a lot more nuance to cooking than I think people sometimes realize. And with Aperitivo, of course, it's different and it's fun.
Yeah, that's the hope. I think one of the things that I really love just in general, I think about Italian culture, and at least, again, these are all such broad generalizations, but I have found there's a lot of there's a lack of self-seriousness in certain ways. Like there's a lot of pride, certainly. And there's a lot of appreciation and respect for the food. But I think there's a playfulness about it that I really like. And that really spoke to me when I was there, because I think we get to a point where everything feels very serious. And especially, I've worked in food for 20 years, more or less. And I have worked in some very self-serious environments. If anybody watches The Bear, that comes to mind. I love the show, but there's something about it where I kind of bristle sometimes, and I'm like, can't we just like have fun with it? If it tastes good, it tastes good, and it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. And same goes for the drinks. I am not a mixologist. I certainly don't claim to have like a deep background in creating drinks, but I think when I have guests, I think it's really fun to play with those drinks a little bit. And that's another thing that the book has a lot of suggestions on how to like modify some of these classic drinks. And the beauty of aperitivo drinks, especially like the Negroni, for example, you have three ingredients, but within those three ingredients, you can do so much, and you don't have to be a skilled bartender to do that. Like to swap gin for tequila, or, swap the kind of vermouth that you're using, or infuse it with coconut or something. Like there's a million ways to play within that framework that don't have to push you too far out of your comfort zone. And I think that's really fun.
And to break the third wall a little bit, your playfulness it reverberates through the microphone, right? Like it's infectious and definitely very refreshing to think about, especially in a place that can be very serious, right? We talk about food and wine sometimes in a very stuffy way, but it's fun and it's about connecting with others and sharing stories.
Totally. The sharing stories, I think, is such a big part of it for me. I like my absolute favorite thing to do in life is just have conversations with people. And, the food and drink is meant to facilitate that. Like we just want to have fun with the people that we care about. And so, I think I've seen a lot of people get really stressed out about making food for other people. And I overwhelmingly find that people are just so appreciative. I have a lot of friends that are like professional chefs, and they come over, and of course I'm always intimidated, to cook for them. And they're like, do you know the last person that cooked for me? There's just an appreciation when someone does something for you, whether that's like a really, beautifully composed thing, or just like some crostini with fresh fruit. It's fun.
Agreed entirely. And, what advice would you give to someone who resonates with these values? How can they go about really leaning into the spirit of Stuzzichini and Aperitivo?
I am a creature of habit, and I do believe that repetition, which creates ritual, also creates a sense of comfort and approachability. And not everybody's life is set up that way to be able to do things like on a regular basis. But one of the things that I really like to do is have like standing dates with groups of friends. Every third Sunday or every third Tuesday, we're going to do this. And maybe you can come and maybe you can't, and that's okay. And we'll see you next month if you can't. But I think it's a nice thing to look forward to. It's reliable. Everybody sort of, I think, gets accustomed to the the way that things run, and so they know what to bring and they know how it's going to play out. And I just think a sense of consistency is really nice. So if you can do that, if you're fortunate enough that your people live around you. I'm also like a big believer in neighborhood and community. And so, open the doors and try to get to know the people around you, because I have a lot of friends and family sort of scattered around the country and the world. And I wish that I could spend more time with them. But I had an aperitivo up on the roof with my landlords recently, and that was just such a nice thing. It was a nice way to get to know them a little bit. And the other thing I will say from like a more practical standpoint is that a lot of these things can be made like sort of on your own time and stored until the moment comes. I grew up in a world where like we had company, quote unquote, I'm using scare quotes here, but you would have the things that were like in the freezer or in the fridge that were for company, and those people might just drop by and then you were ready. And so I like to have some of that stuff. Like I'm looking right now at the book, and there are like some compound butters and stuff like that you can make when you are, I don't know, listening to a podcast, for example, and put that in the fridge. And then when people come over, if you have crackers and some like cool compound butter with like, orange zest and vanilla, like that's impressive and fun. Anchovies you grab them out of the fridge and they're good to go. So having those like little things that make it'll take you 5 minutes to put something like that together, and it still feels ceremonious. And same goes for cocktails. I like to batch cocktails in advance so that, you sort of have them in the freezer door or the fridge door. And if anybody pops by, or you are just feeling like tonight's the night and you don't want to worry about making plans in the future, which I think sometimes people get a little like pressured by, you have it ready to go. And it's just like not a big deal.
Yeah. And before we start wrapping up, I have some rapid fire questions which kind of relate to everything you just talked about, if you are ready to get into it. So what's the favorite recipe from your book?
Again, it's hard to call it a recipe, but anchovy toast, which is very a lot of these recipes are regional and specific to particular regions, but you will find anchovy toast in a lot of places in Italy. And it really is as simple as it sounds. It is a nice piece of bread, a thick slab of butter, be generous, a fillet or two of anchovies, and if you've got it, lemon zest, and it's perfect. It's totally balanced.
I love it. What's your favorite place you've traveled to? And that could be in Italy or beyond.
Oh, gosh. I really love some of the regions that I think are a little bit overlooked, or at least less associated with Italian travel, like northern parts of northern Italy. The Dolomites are absolutely stunning. And, the mountains are just spectacular. I loved Friuli, Venezia Giulia, which is a northern region that has a lot of like Austrian and Hungarian influence, and the food is so different than anything you might consider to be Italian. There are some coastal cities in central Italy, Massa and Livorno, that I really love. Sicily. Yeah, I could go on. And that's just Italy, but whole other podcast.
Totally. What's your favorite place in the U.S. for aperitivo or Stuzzichini?
Aside from a friend's backyard,
that's a great answer.
At least right now, that's what I'm thinking about in the height of summer. But yeah, I think the beauty is that as the practice sort of spreads, a lot of bars now do something like this. And certainly you can get a Negroni or a Spritz almost anywhere now. And I'm very much a regular person. Like, I have my regular spots. I rarely venture beyond the 4 blocks of my immediate neighborhood. So I think, to me, the best place for an aperitivo, if not a friend's house, is your local bar, supporting your local establishments, the people that are the foundation of your community. That, to me, is like the best version of it.
I love that. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oof. Oh man, you're hitting me hard. In the US, I tend to go for almost anything that has peanut butter or citrus. I love like orange creamsicle, lemon flavors, which are rare. But in Italy, if I'm going to try a new place for gelato, it has to start with either hazelnut or pistachio. That is like the baseline to me, and how you know if a place is doing it right.
Amazing. And last but not least, we try to ask all of our guests about this question, and that is, what's in your glass? A drink you've been loving lately?
And Milano Torino is just like, it is my perfect drink. I used to love a Manhattan. I unfortunately do not process alcohol quite as well as I once did. And same for Negroni. And a Milano Torino is essentially a Negroni without the gin. It's equal parts Campari or a similar red bitter. I happen to really be a big fan of St. Augustus here in Brooklyn, and a sweet vermouth. And I love it so much. It is, to me, the perfect before dinner drink. I keep a bottle of it always in my fridge. And I also like to infuse it with different things. I mentioned coconut earlier. I've been toasting coconut and infusing that into a bottled Milano Torino lately. That is just perfect.
Amazing. And before we head off, do you have any final words for our listeners today?
I aside from thank you, I think my feeling always is just get your people together. Go spend time with your people, and more, and in a less planned way, and just try to be present for them.
I love that. And where can our listeners find you if you want to give yourself a plug?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at sl.ferrari. And I also have a Substack that is not particular to Stuzzichini, but it is there's usually a recipe involved. It's a little bit of a pop culture kind of roundup, but it also will have some travel bits and stories from my time in Italy.
Awesome. Well, Stef, expression of gratitude. Thank you so much again for taking the time to chat today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm excited for our listeners to hopefully enjoy the magic aperitivo and Stuzzichini themselves.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate it.
What role do food and drink play in your life? And do you have any rituals that bring people together around it? We'd love to know. You can email us your comments and questions at podcast@wineenthusiast.com. Remember, You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite shows. You can also go to wineenthusiast.com/podcast for more episodes and transcripts. I'm Samantha Setti. Thanks for listening.